Are you struggling to set up authentication in your Next.js project? Are you overwhelmed by the 10 different options thrown at you guys by different YouTubers? If so, in this video, I will give you guys a crash course on setting up authentication in Next.js using one of the best auth providers out there, Better Auth. On top of that, I will also discuss the different options and let you know which I would pick depending on which project you are building. The entire code for this video will be in the description, and this video is not sponsored, so you can be sure that everything I talk about in this video is my opinion. Now, to understand Next.js, you need to get the fundamentals of React first. And there's no better place to learn React than through my new course platform, WebDev Ultra. Currently, we have one course available, and it is my React.js Ultra course for beginners. However, depending on when you're watching this video, my new Next.js course will already be out. If you're interested in checking it out, just click the link in the description or go to webdevultra.com. Now, let's get started by going over what auth in Next.js means and what options are out there. Well, first, authentication in Next.js is how we prove who a user is and what they're allowed to do. So that means that it covers sign up, sign in, issuing and validating session or tokens, guarding routes and API endpoints, and enforcing authorization so that we're sure that only the right people can see or do certain things. To handle authentication in your Next.js project, it is actually advised that you don't roll out your own auth. It is advised that you use an auth library. And there are many options out there. So here is what I would recommend depending on what kind of project you are building. So first, we have a very famous library out there called Clerk, which is a hosted auth platform that gives you full auth integration, and it also has some beautiful UI components that will make it actually super easy for you to add authentication to any project. In my opinion, it is the fastest way for you to actually ship production-ready auth. However, it is paid, and that puts some people off, so you will have to incur the cost of them handling all of the auth and all of the data for you. In my opinion, they are amazing, but use it when you either need to ship auth fast or you're fine with paying extra for a hosted service. It is really good, so it is worth the price, but for some projects you might just not want that and want an open source alternative. And a great example of that is what we're using for this video, Better Auth. Better Auth is a framework agnostic open source alternative that makes it super easy for us to integrate it into our projects. You keep control over your data and UI, so that means that you will have to set up your own database and your sign-in pages and components. But out of the open source options out there, I feel like Better Auth is becoming one of the best ones. It's even taking over other options like auth.ts that is more popular, and it is what we're going to be using in this video. Now, the third option is in the case in which you're using a BaaS for your project. And by a BaaS, I mean something like Supabase, Firebase, AppWrite, something like that. Since you're already using them, it makes sense to just use their authentication since it plays well with their APIs. Now that you understand all the different options, let's get started with the tutorial. Just make sure first that you download the starter code in the description. Okay, everyone. So to start off this tutorial, I have here a starter repo that I want you guys to clone and open up inside of your computer. So in here, we have a simple web app that is, it's not a real web app, it's just a website that has, it's for the purposes of this video, it's where I'm teaching you guys authentication with Better Auth. So it's not a real website, and the UI of it was completely built with AI, but it's going to serve as a good template for us to learn how to implement authentication in Next.js. So this website has a couple parts to it. So it has a homepage, which would be the marketing page for any website. It should mainly be statically generated. It shouldn't be something that needs to be authenticated to be able to access, because it's the main page of your website. You want people to access it even if they are not logged in. Then we have here in this template one route that when we create our authentication, we only want to allow the user to access this route if they are authenticated. So in here, it's the dashboard page, not really a real page, but it would include stuff like being able to manage yourself, information about yourself, and stuff like that. And you're also able to sign out from here as well. Now, to access this page, we're going to validate to see if the user is authenticated or not. And obviously, to do that, we need to have a sign in or sign up page. So we'll have this one over here, which allows us to create an account or sign in to an account. And as an example here for you guys, I decided to use 3 different methods of creating and signing into an account. The first one is the most classic one. email and password, where we're going to allow the user to enter an email, a password, and their full name, and create an account based on that. But also, I'm going to show you guys how to integrate different social providers, such as Google and GitHub. Those are some of the most common ones, especially for people in the area of programming. So when the user creates their account, they should not see the sign-in page anymore in the navbar. They should not be able to go into the auth route because they're logged in, and they should now be able to access the dashboard. So this is the template we're going to be using for this video, and the code exists right over here. Now, it isn't anything complicated. I don't want you guys to overthink this. This is just UI. You see here we have a page component. For the route is the server component, and each server route has a client component that is displayed. You can go to the navbar component over here. You can go to the sign-in component. This is the component that we see over here, and it's everything is nothing's functional. You see that all the functions over here to sign in are all just console log. When you click on it, nothing really happens. So we're gonna start everything immediately from scratch. So in order for us to set up authentication in an Next.js project, we need to install our authenticated provider. In this case, we're going to be using Better Auth. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to install npm install Better Auth. This is the first thing we need to install. Now, Better Auth is going to handle all the authentication for our project. But in order for us to have authentication in our project, we actually need to have something else. And what is this? Well, this is a database in which you're going to store the data for the user. So Better Auth creates the infrastructure for us to handle and serve our auth. But when you authenticate a user, you need to have somewhere in which you're going to save their information when they create an account and validate if the user session is valid. And to do that, we need to be using a database. Now, I want to make this video agnostic. It doesn't matter if you're using, I don't know, MongoDB. It doesn't matter if you're using SQLite. It doesn't matter what you're using. I'm going to make it as simple as possible because Better Auth is that simple. I'm going to be using in this video a PostgreSQL database, and I'll be using an ARM to handle that database. There are various different ARMs you can use. There's Drizzle, there's Prisma, there is SQLize, there's a bunch of options out there, and I'll show you guys right now what we have to do to be able to use them in our project. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create a .env.local file that is going to contain our environment variables. So I'm going to say .env.local, and in here for Better Auth, we need two environment variables. We need a auth secret, and we need a Better Auth URL. Now the URL here obviously is the URL of where your app website is being hosted. Currently my website is on localhost 3000, so I'll put here http://localhost 3000. Then for the Better Auth secret, I want you guys to go to the Better Auth docs, the installation over here, which if you go down here, you should see this section where it asks for a secret key, and it allows you to generate a random secret key. You can just click this and it will generate one for you. You copy that and we can go back and paste it on our file. I can put the link for this in the description so you guys have access to it as well. So this is the auth secret that I'm using. Then we need to make our main file that is gonna serve as the configuration file for our authentication. Now, it is recommended that we create it inside of the lib folder that usually exists in every Next.js project, and we're gonna call it auth.ts. Now, inside of here, I want to export a constant called auth, and I'm gonna set this equal to Better Auth, and I'm going to import Better Auth from the Better Auth library. Now, in this Better Auth function, I'm going to put an object as the argument to it, and in here we're going to put all the configuration information for our Better Auth authentication. The first thing we need to do is we're going to say that we want to allow email and password authentication. I'm going to set enable to true, and what this will do is it will allow us to create auth and sign up that is done through email and password. Now, the other two options, right, which are Google and GitHub, the way we enable them is by passing a social providers object here and passing a GitHub for the GitHub social provider. And inside of here, we have to pass for it a client ID, which we don't have right now. So I'll just pass an empty string. And we need to pass a client secret, which I'll show you guys later on in the video how to get that. Now to do the same thing, we need to do the same thing for Google. So I'll change this to Google, and it's going to ask for the same information. For every social provider you have, you need to go ahead and get those credentials with them individually. Better Auth won't do that for you. Now we're going to start off immediately just doing the email and password, and we'll leave the social providers to the end. Now, the next thing we need is we need to tell Better Auth where are we going to store the data about the user. Whenever a user creates their account, where are we going to start? So what is the database that we're going to be using? Now with Better Auth, there are many ways in which you can set this value. Now imagine you're not using an ORM, you're just accessing using a database on its own, like using Postgres or using SQLite or using MySQL, something like that. Then it's a bit different. And I recommend you guys checking out the first link in the description, which will have the docs for that specific section. But if you're using an ORM, which I recommend everyone to be using on every project, and I'm assuming you guys use one too, then here's how you're going to do it. So there are a couple options of the ORMs you can be using. So there's Drizzle, there's Prisma, there's MongoDB with Mongoose. No matter what, to actually integrate that ORM with Better Auth authentication, you need to import from Better Auth /adapters/ and then you put the name of your ORM. In this project, I'm going to be using Prisma as my ORM with a PostgreSQL database. To do this, I'm going to import the Prisma adapter, and I'm going to just paste it as part of the database right over here. Now, remember, you don't have to be using Prisma. The process for this is going to be very similar depending on if you're using any other type of ORM. So don't worry if it looks a bit different in your end. So this next section over here, I'm just going to show you guys really quickly how to set up Prisma so that we have this set up. And if you guys want to follow me along, I recommend you guys doing so as well. So what I want to do now is I want to install Prisma into my project. So to do that, I'm going to say npm install Prisma, and we should install this. And then after that's done installing, we can come to our terminal, and I can run npx prisma init. If you don't have the command installed, then it might ask you to install it, but this should set up Prisma in our project. You'll see that now we have this Prisma folder over here with a schema. Now, what is this schema? Well, this schema is going to be what we're going to be defining our database tables to be. And that's really important. Why? Because Better Auth has a specific way in which they save the data about the user in your database. You don't define what a user table looks like. Better Auth has a way to define that. And it's very easy for us to generate those tables. You'll see right now what we have to do is we just have to call the Prisma generate function, which will generate some types. I'm going to say npx Prisma generate. This should generate some all the Prisma client types for us, which will create a folder. As you can see over here, this folder called generated. And if you're not familiar with Prisma, it's fine. What this is we now can import Prisma client from this generated folder. That's all we did. And what is Prisma client? It's basically what we need to pass as the Prisma instance to this Prisma adapter over here. So in every scenario, if you're using Drizzle, it would be something like this. If you're using MongoDB, it would be something like this. You need to have a client and you pass it to the Prisma adapter. But remember, Prisma is not, it's an ORM that handles SQL, but it doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to be a PostgreSQL database. So I need to specify what provider we're going to be passing. And in this case, it's going to be PostgreSQL. So we specify over here, if this was MySQL, I would put MySQL. But it's PostgreSQL. Perfect. Now, let's open this up. You see right now, we have this schema over here, right? Now, we have no tables for users. And the way we generate the tables for users based on what Better Auth wants us to do, is by running this command. We run npx better auth CLI/generate. And what's crazy is this command will detect our schema file, depending on what type of ORM we're using or what type of database we're using, and it will generate the schema it requires for us. So you see here, it's doing everything for us, and then it's gonna ask us, the file .prisma/schema.prisma already exists. Do you want to overwrite this file? Because I do want to overwrite this file, I will put yes. And as you can see over here, now this file has the models for what a user looks like, a model for a session, an account, a verification. Now, this are 3 different tables that we're going to have in our database table. Right? It's 4 actually, 4 different tables. Sorry. And all we have to do now is just save it in our tables. Now, I currently don't have a database. I don't have a Postgres database right now. So I'm going to create one real quick, and I'm going to show you guys how I would go ahead and create a free PostgreSQL database in a very fast manner. And the way I would do it is with Neon, which is not sponsoring this video in case you're wondering. I just really like their product, and I do have a link with them. If you guys want to check it out, it will be in the description. But again, not sponsored. I just really like them because it's really easy for us to create a database, especially a PostgreSQL database. So I'm going to come here, I'm going to click new project, and I'll just call it auth course, something like this. I'll choose the cloud service provider as AWS. I'll choose the location. Since I am in the west of North America, I'll choose Oregon, and I'm going to click on create. This will allow us to create a Postgres table or a Postgres database for free in like less than 10 seconds. Now, we want to get something that is going to allow us to connect Prisma in our project with this database that is hosted in the cloud. You see here that in the schema.prisma, we are needing to pass a URL, meaning the database URL. And this is actually something that is present here in our .env file. Now, we didn't create this .env file. When we ran npx prisma init, it created this for us, and it created this environment variable with this URL over here, which is just a random localhost URL. Instead of this, we want to actually click on connect, and it is going to give us a connection string. We're going to copy this. We're going to go back over here, and we're just going to paste it. Perfect. I'm just going to open this up a bit more. Now I'm going to close this up, and we should be good to go. Now, I want to transfer the tables that we have in our project, in our schema.prisma file, into real tables that exist on this Neon database. You see, if you go to the tables tab over here, there's absolutely no tables created. To do this, I'm going to run over here. I'm going to clear this up, and I'm going to say npx prisma migrate dev, because this is development, --name, and I'm going to just call it init. This is our initial migration. Now, the migrate command in Prisma is just to send the changes to our schema that we have locally into our database that we connected through this URL. And this is exactly what happened. If I refresh this, we should now see all the tables that Better Auth created as part of the tables in our database. And just a second, and yes, it is. It also includes the migration, so every time we migrate, it will show something like that. But here it is. We have a table for the session, account, user, and verification. Great. So this was all kind of just Prisma, Postgres. I know if you came here just for Better Auth, this is for me to set up a foundation. And I think it's very easy for you guys to set up even as a test project along with me, even if you're not going to actually use Prisma or PostgreSQL, because now we get into the details of how Better Auth is going to work. Now we should be good to go to be able to set up our authentication. Now, the only thing I want to do is I also want to pass at the bottom over here a list of plugins. And the only plugin I want to pass here is I want to pass the Next Cookies plugin. Now, this plugin is specific for Next.js. So if you're using Better Auth with something other than Next.js, you won't need to do this. But for Next.js, in order for Better Auth to be able to properly handle cookies, we need to pass this as a plugin, and also it has to be the last plugin you pass. So make sure you do that. I'm going to import the next cookies function and I'm going to pass it over here. So if I had other plugins, I would put them in front of the next cookies. Great. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to come here to our app folder. And in the API folder over here, we need to actually create a folder inside of it called auth. And we need to create another folder inside of it called square brackets, 3 dots, all. And inside of that, we need to create a route.ts. Now, this is all configuration, so you don't really need to care that much. This is just something that Better Auth requires us to have in our project, and you shouldn't touch this ever again. So you paste this code over here. It's directly from the documentation, and you just paste it here, and it should be fine. Now, the auth function that we imported is the one from this file. So if you put this file, auth.ts, in a different path, make sure you change this to that specific path. Perfect. Now I'm going to close that. And finally, we can start building our auth functions. So if we go here to the auth client, which is the client component that handles this page over here, you see we have everything already set up, right? We have, if you go down to the UI, we have the forms that has the, if I go down here, it has the form, which has an on submit. It has the input for full name. If we go to sign up, full name, email address, and password, and we can submit the form. Now this on submit function that I just mentioned over here, it's called handle email auth. And what it does is it obviously handles loading and error states, all of that you don't really need to do it, but it's important for a proper website. And then it tries to sign in or sign up the user. And if there's any errors, it catches it. So this is what it is. Now this try over here is the important part, because this function is called when we try to create an account with user email and password, or sign in with the user email and password. Now, the state of whether we're trying to sign in or sign up is based on this state over here called is sign in, and it changes every time we click on this button. Now, over here again, you see that if is sign in, we want to do something. If not, we want to sign up. So this is the case. So we want to create a function that we call over here, and it allows the user to sign in this case, and sign up in this case. So to do that, we actually want to utilize the Better Auth support for server functions. And we're going to do that through server actions. So I'm going to create here in our lib folder a new folder called actions. And I'm going to put here the auth-actions file. And inside of here, I'm going to put a couple functions, or more specifically, a couple server actions that are going to be useful for authenticating. Now, to make this into a server action file, I need to make sure at the top I say use server, and then we should be good to go. Now, the first function I want to create is the sign up function. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to say export const sign up, and it's going to be an async function that will allow us to pass an email, which is a string, a password, which is a string, and a name, which is a string. Now, what do we do with that? Well, we're going to be using Better Auth to be able to sign up the user based on that. Now, to do that, we're going to create a variable called result, which is going to store the result of this attempt at signing up. Then I'm going to await, and I'm going to call the auth function that we exported from the double.auth file. Then we're going to say auth.api dot, and then we can access the function for sign up email. This function allows us to sign up a user using email and password. Inside of it, we need to pass an object, which requires a body, and that body requires us to pass an email, a password, a name, also an image, which is optional. If you want to pass a profile image for the user, you can pass it here. I didn't want to include this video because it would make it unnecessarily complex. But if you want to pass profile pictures, you can store that as well through that. But also, we can pass a callback URL, which means that if the user is successful in trying to sign up, it will redirect the user to whatever route you pass over here. And it's great for us because when the user signs in or signs up, we want to redirect them to the dashboard page, which should only be accessible with a user authenticated. Great. Now, after this, we want to return the result. Not return. We want to return the result. Perfect. Now, this is the sign up function. What about the sign in function? Well, it's going to be pretty similar. So I'm going to create here the sign in function. The only difference is we don't need to pass the name for this, just the email and password. And also, this is going to say sign in email instead of sign up. Then we remove the name, and this should be good to go. It's pretty much the same. We also want to redirect the user to the dashboard if that happens. Now, finally, I want to create here the sign out function. So I'll make here the sign out function. Doesn't require any arguments because when you click a button, you should just sign out. And the difference with the sign out function is that it requires us to pass the headers so that it knows what to do with it. And the headers we can get from the next headers. So I'm going to say import headers from next headers, and we'll just paste and await the headers function. This is a pattern that you'll see a lot with different functionalities using Better Auth. Perfect. And then we can return the result in that as well. Great. Now we have all of our auth actions done. We can now implement them in our client. So for example, I'll come here to our auth client, and in here with the if sign in, this is the case in which we want to allow a user to sign in to their account. To do this, I'm going to say const result. I'm going to set to await sign in and import the file or the function from our actions folder. Then I'm going to pass an email and a password. Now in this component, I made it such that we're already saving whatever the user is typing on the inputs into states like email, password, name, and so on. So it's as simple as just doing that. And then to handle any errors, if there's any issues, we can check over here real quick that if the result of the sign-in doesn't include a user, then it means it was invalid. So we can, for example, say set error and then just put a generic error like invalid, email, or password. Then let's handle the sign up case. So over here, I'm just going to copy and paste the sign in, but I'm going to call this sign up in this case. I'm going to change this to email and then pass name at the end because that's also required for the sign up. And then the error message will just say failed to create account. Perfect. So this is how we create the sign up and the sign in. Now let's test this out. Let me come over here. This is already the sign up, right? I'm going to open up our network tab because sometimes, even though I'm expecting that it's going to work, sometimes it doesn't. And if it doesn't, we're going to debug together. In here, I'm just going to put Pedro Machado. That's my name. I'm going to put a random email over here. I'm going to say test@gmail.com. And then I'm going to put a password. I'm going to say password at 145. I'm going to click on create account. And as you can see, it is creating an account and it seems to have been successful. Now, how do we check to see if this was successful? Well, we can go to our database. We can refresh the page or the tables, and we should now see that there are users in our table. So if I go here to user or account, we should now see, it took a bit to load. I got scared for a second, but you should see that it appears over here that Better Auth has saved our information in whatever database we provided to it. And it created a session as well. But obviously, we didn't tell it what to do with that session. Now, what do I mean by it created a session? Well, literally, when we sign up a user, it automatically signs in the user as well, which is pretty good behavior if that's what you want. And you can actually disable that yourself. And the way you would do that is by going to your auth.ts file over here. And on the email and password object, you could remove auto sign in and set it to false. It defaults to true, and that's what I like because it makes it so much easier. So I'm going to keep it like that. Now, one thing is, you might have noticed that nothing really happened, right? We created the account and all, but nothing happened. And that's because we're not currently doing anything when the user, with the user information of whether they are logged in or not. So what we want to do is we want to have a way to detect if the user is logged in. And if they are, we want to, for example, not allow them to go to the auth page. We want to allow them to go to the dashboard and also change the navbar based on this. So we'll start with changing the navbar. I'm gonna come here to our navbar, and in this navbar component over here, we want to be able to detect if the user is authenticated or not, because depending on if they are, we're gonna display some links and not display some others. So if the user is logged in, we'll display the dashboard link and remove the sign-in link, and in the opposite case, we'll do the opposite. We'll just remove the dashboard and only show the sign-in. Now, to detect if a user is authenticated or not using Better Auth, it's a bit tricky. You might have noticed that since we're using Next.js, I'm doing everything in the server. So I used here the Better Auth server function to be able to sign up and sign in the user, all using server actions. You can actually use a auth client, which allows you to have functions that you can access in client components in Next.js. However, that's not the most secure way to do it with Next.js. With Next.js, you definitely want the user to be validated in the server, not just handle everything in the client. So that's why we're doing everything in the server. That means that in a component such as the navigation component, which is the navbar over here, it is a client component. So we have no way to know if the user is authenticated or not based on this. So what we have to do is we need to get that information from a server component and pass it down to this navigation component. Now this navbar component is called in the layout.tsx, which is indeed a server component. So in the root layout, I want to access this function from our auth function that we have here in our auth.ts file. And this function is going to give us back a variable called session. And to do this, I'm going to say await auth.api. I need to import the auth function. So auth.api.get session. And this get session function will give us back the current session of the user. Now to do that, we also need to pass headers similar to how we did with the sign out function. So I'm going to say headers is equal to await headers, and you need to import headers from next headers. Then with this session variable, we know a bunch of things. For example, we can know the user session, such as when it was created, when it expires, the token, the user ID, all that kind of stuff. But we can also know information about the user, such as their email, their image, which means their profile picture, their name, they're created at, and so on. So this is why this session variable is important, because if the session is valid, if the value for user is not null, then it means the user is logged in. So what I want to do is I want to pass this session variable as an argument, as a prop to this navigation component, this navbar component. So I'll pass it over here. And in this component, I want to create at the top over here. I'm going to destructure the session, and I need to define the type for it because we're using TypeScript. Now, if you're not using TypeScript, just ignore this, but you can't just use the session type from Better Auth. And the reason for that is because this is more referencing the client version of this value, but we're using the server version. So we actually want to do this little trick, which is recommended by, I believe, the Better Auth doc, but it's called, you create a type called session, and you make it be a type of auth.infer infer.session, and we need to import this auth variable. And with this, we have this session variable that includes properly what we need from this variable. Now, as you can see, it's still giving us an error, and the reason for that is because we don't know if the session is going to be valid or not. Whatever this returns might be null, because if it is null, it means the user is not logged in. So we want to make this also possibly be null. And this should be good to go now. And now, all we need to know if the user is logged in or not is to see if the session is valid. For example, I don't want to show this sign in link if the session is valid. If the session is not valid, I want to show it. Meaning if the user is not logged in, I want to show the sign in button or the sign in link. So if I make this check, if not session, then you see the sign in link should disappear because we have a session. But if I do the opposite, I just check to see if the session is valid over here and show the link, we should still see the same thing for the dashboard because the user is logged in. Perfect. So this is the first way you can detect if a user is logged in or not. And that's good for minor things like changing the UI a bit. But when you're dealing with authentication, one of the most important things you need to learn is how to handle detecting if a user can access a page or not. Now, you might expect that we will create a middleware file in this project, right? Because Next.js allows you to create a middleware that will serve, that will run in between every single route. And in here, it's a great place for you to do auth checks and detect if the user can access certain pages. However, the Better Auth documentation doesn't recommend that you redirect using middleware due to the fact that to do that, you need to access and retrieve the current session cookie. But the way it's going to happen in the middleware file is it's only going to check for an existence of a session cookie in the current session. It doesn't validate to see if it's the correct one, meaning that a user can easily just create a random cookie pretending to be the session and bypass this. So we don't want to do it through here. They recommend that we actually do it individually in each route, depending on where we want to go. So what I mean is, if I were to come over here and I were to try to go to the sign in page, or actually it's the auth page, we shouldn't be able to access. Oh, I should delete the middleware file. So I shouldn't be able to access this auth page because I am logged in right now. So the easiest way to do this is we're going to go to the auth page, the server component that renders the route, not the client. And that's exactly why I created a client and a server version, because we need to get the session, we need to do it in a server component. And in here, I'm going to do exactly what we did over here. I'm going to copy this to get the session. I'm going to paste it up here. Now we need to import the auth file and we need to import the headers from next headers. But then I'm just going to check to see if the session exists. Then I want to do something. In this case, if the session exists, I don't want to render the auth client. I actually don't want the user to be here if they are logged in. If they're logged in, I actually want to redirect them to the dashboard page. And you see that now, if I refresh this, it shouldn't be broken and I'm in the dashboard page. Great. I physically can't go to the auth page. You see, it will just redirect me to the dashboard page. Great. And to do this exact same thing with the dashboard, we'll just come here to the dashboard route. We'll go to the server component that it exists, and I'll paste this. I'll import the auth. I'll import the headers, and I'm going to import the redirect. But instead of checking to see if a session exists, I'm going to check to see if it doesn't exist, because this is a route that needs to be authenticated. And the redirect, instead of going to the dashboard, which is where we are right now, I'm going to take the user to the auth page. Great. This doesn't really change much because we are authenticated, but it should work if we were to log out. But how do we log out? You might be asking. Well, let's go to where I have this dashboard client. This is where I have this sign out button. And in here, I'm going to call the handle sign out function. Right now, we really don't do anything. We just have this alert. So what I want to do is I want to call the await sign out function that exists from our server action. And this will make it such that we can redirect ourselves. Now, because we couldn't pass a callback URL like we did with the other options over here, as you can see, we're going to manually redirect the user. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say router.push, and I'm going to redirect the user to the auth page when they redirect. I'm using the router from the use router hook from Next navigation. Make sure that if you're doing that, you're importing it from Next navigation. Now you see that if I sign out, the session is destroyed. The navbar now only shows the sign in, it doesn't show the dashboard. And if I were to dare to go to the dashboard page, it would take me back to the auth page. Great thing. Now we're pretty much done. What we want to do now is I want to show you guys how to integrate a Google and GitHub sign-in. So to do this, I want you guys to open up the links I'm going to put on the description for GitHub and for the Google Cloud Platform. For this are the two ways you can get your information to your credentials for you to put onto the social providers that we have over here. If I go to auth.ts, this is how you do it. So to do that, what we want to do is I want to come here on GitHub and I'm going to go to settings. Then on settings, I want to go to down here and I'm going to go to developer settings. Then on developer settings, I want to go to OAuth apps and I want to click on new OAuth app. When I click on new OAuth app, I want to give an application name. For example, I can call this Better Auth tutorial. I'm not sure. Then the homepage URL, you put the URL of your website. So in my case, it's just going to be the localhost 3000. You can put an application description, whatever you want. But then the authorization callback URL, it's very important. You have to make it be exactly this. So it has to be the URL of your website, which in development is going to be localhost 3000. Then it has to be /API/auth/callback/GitHub. Make sure it's that, and then you can register the application. So I'm going to register the application. We're going to have application created successfully. Make sure you don't use the same things as I have, just because there's no point. I'm going to delete this immediately after. But here you get the client ID and you see this is something we need. I'm just going to paste it here for a second, but we're definitely going to turn that into an environment variable. And then we need a client secret, but you need to generate a new client secret to do that. And it's going to ask for some two-factor authentication. In my end, I'm going to do this real quick. And then as you can see, it shows up over here, our client secret. I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it over here. So that's GitHub done. Now let's do Google. To Google, you go to your Google Cloud Platform. And I already have a project here. If you don't have a project created with Google Cloud, you need to create one. It's pretty simple. Just follow the instructions. When you do, you're going to find yourself in this part of the console over here. You go to clients and you go to OAuth client. You click on create client and you need to give an application type. I'm going to make this be a web application. You need to give it a name. I'm just going to call it Better Auth project. Then it's going to ask us for our authorized redirect URIs. So this is similar to what we just did with the callback URL. We're going to paste this localhost 3000 /API/auth/callback/Google. And we're going to click on create. And this should create our client. You see that it should give us a client ID and a client secret. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it over here. Then I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it over here. Now let's make environment variables for this. So what we want to do is we want to go to our .env.local. And in here, we want to create 4 variables. We want to create a Google client ID, a Google client secret, a GitHub client ID, and a GitHub client secret. I'm just going to copy this for the GitHub client ID, paste it here. I need to paste it properly so it works. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Actually, I'm going to cut myself doing this and I'll be back in a second. Perfect. So I just finished pasting all of them over here. And I also used them inside of our social providers by just saying process.env.GitHub client ID and so on as per Google as well. So that's great. Now let's make it such that when we click on these buttons, it actually does something. I know it looks like it's already functional, but it definitely isn't. So to do that, what I want to do is I want to come to our auth client. And similar to how we had here our handle email auth, which we called our sign-in functionalities, we have here our handle social auth that allows us to sign in with either Google or GitHub. And when we click on this button, either Google or GitHub is going to be passed as the provider. That's how we know which one it is. So what we need to do is we need to create a server action for signing in with a social provider, similar to what we did with the email. So I'm going to call it sign in social, and it's going to require us to just pass a provider. So it's either going to be GitHub or it's going to be Google. Those are the only 2 options. Then in here, we're going to say sign in social. And then instead of passing an email or a password, I just need to pass a provider. Now, what provider do I need to pass? Well, it's exactly in the same format as this. It's either GitHub or Google. So I'm just going to pass it like this. It's just a text with the name of the provider. So this should match it properly. Now, if there's any issues, we'll handle it over here. So we're going to do the same thing we did with this. We're just going to copy this. We're going to paste it over here. If there's any errors, then we'll say error authenticating with, and then I'll put the provider here. Then in here, we want to call the sign in social, and we just want to pass the provider as the argument to it. Now it's given us an error, and that's actually because we accidentally imported the wrong sign in social. I want to import the one from auth actions, and this should be good to go. Now we don't actually need a result here. Let me actually remove this, and the result should actually come from here. Instead of just returning the result, what I actually want to do is the following. This over here is going to return a result that includes a URL, and we want to redirect the user to this URL if they are if there is a valid URL. So if URL is valid, we want to redirect with from next navigation, redirect the user to that URL. So now let's open this up. Let's refresh the page. Let me try signing in with GitHub. I'm going to click this. It's going to redirect us to GitHub, and I'll try signing up with my account. It's going to ask me for more two-factor authentication. So I'll just do it real quick. When it's done, it's going to ask me if I want to allow for this to happen, and it will redirect us back to our homepage. And when that happens, check out what it's going to look like. Look at this. We're logged in. We see the dashboard. We don't see the sign-in page. We're perfectly logged in, and it's all fine. So this is how you integrate GitHub and Google. I'm not going to show the Google one because I'm incognito and I would have to sign in again or create another account. But that's the basics of it. You know that it worked with GitHub. Now you know it works with Google. Now, the last thing that I think, and by the way, since we signed up with GitHub, now every time we click the button, we're already authenticating GitHub. So it's as easy as clicking that. The last thing I'm going to show is just how to access really quickly information about the user. Just as a final thing that I think is important with authentication is being able to read the data for the user. So we here in our, actually I'll make this a little bit bigger. In our dashboard page over here, you see there's a user that kind of looks like Tim Cook called John Doe, right? And this user is just fake data. That's how I made it. I just wrote John Doe as a fake text. We actually want to use the real data for the user in this case. So here's what we want to do. We are in the client page. So as part of this client, I want to receive the session as an argument to this component. And we did this in our navigation over here in our nav bar. So I want to do something like that. So we're going to import that type that we created for the session, import the auth, and then just define the type here to be equal to that. So it's equal to session. Now we don't need to make it null like we did over here. Why? Because the dashboard assumes that the session exists, because either if that didn't happen, if the session was null, then you actually would have been redirected here. So it doesn't even give us an error message if we pass the session, because we're already handling the case in which the session is nil. Then actually, why is it giving us an error message? Shouldn't. Oh, it's because we actually need to do this. Sorry. So we do this, and it should be good to go. Perfect. Now, to access the information about the user, we're going to say const user is equal to session dot user. And now with this, if I want to, for example, replace the data here for John Doe, right? So where is John Doe? Here. Instead of doing this, I can just say user dot name. Same thing with email. I can just say user dot email. Same thing with other information like let me see, provider, I guess so. Do we have access to that? User dot I think that's actually part of the session, so I'm not even gonna do that. User ID. I can say user dot ID email verified. That's actually a property as well. So I can say user email verified. And you can see now that it says Pedro Machado. It has my email. It has my user ID here. And it says, oh, user email verified is actually a Boolean. So I should do something like this. So yeah, my email is verified because I use GitHub for it. So that's pretty much it. And there is some more to authentication. However, I feel like this is a pretty good breakdown of how you can serve authentication into your project using Next.js. So you're going to have a couple things that you're always going to do. And I think Better Auth is one of the best solutions out there. Like I explained in the beginning of the video, choosing your authentication depends on whether or not what kind of purpose you're going for this. And Better Auth for a lot of people is going to be the better option. For a lot of people, a better option is going to be something like Clerk. But I think Better Auth is a great option as well. And I highly recommend you guys using it. Again, I'm not sponsored in this video, so every opinion I'm giving here is 100% mine. So do with that what you want. Again, if you guys want to check out my React.js course, please go to webdevultra.com. I'm about to release my Next.js full course. And if you're interested in learning Next.js from me, it's probably already released. Not by the time I release this video, but if you're watching this even a month after I released it, you might actually see it. So if you guys are interested, just go to webdevultra.com and you should find, or click the link in the description and you should find my Next.js course. So thank you so much everyone for watching this video. Again, check out the code in the description and I see you guys next time.